basic id or a basic ID is an assessment that is not only a form, but it's also a theory, and it's an interview technique that is meant to. This is an acronym that Arnold Lazarus had developed this. Not only the form, but the acronym and the ontology that goes with it. That being, we are all basic ID organisms. So this is the inventory here. It's 16 pages long, and the therapist will use it to give to their patient either before or during the first interview or session rather, and then they can use it to find what are the primary issues, see if they're a good match, see if maybe they need a more serious therapist, make a referral. So basically, this basic ID assessment, a theory, is it has test-retest utility. So you can administer this at the beginning and at the end to see progress. It also has utility during therapy because it's more than just a form. It's also interview. And finally, it's really useful for educating the patient, because this is really all about it's at its roots. It's a behaviorist approach to learning theory, and it'll give the ABCs of a behaviorist is the idea that conditions or the affect will change a behavior through re-educating the individual, and that everything is learned, that everything is material, but this is more than just ABC. It's supposed to be comprehensive, and at any rate, while the form itself may be sort of self-therapeutic, the therapist is also actively using it during therapy, and they will teach the person what basic ID stands for. So B is for, that's what they do at first. B is for behavior. That's everything you do. What do you like to do? Well, what would you like to do? What do you not like to do? These are modes. And once you establish what do you want to do, many people will say, I want to go back to school. I want to study music. I want to this and that. What's in your way? So you have this mode is very well validated. Behavioral, the idea of a behavior and being able to assess it through a conscious self-report is very well established, and one of the early people that inspired this basic ID was Ellis, who came up with this irrational belief system idea. Is that if it's irrational belief system, it gets in the way, and behavior changes during a person's life. So this is something that is revisited regularly, and you can always learn more about it. A is for affect. That means feelings. A psychologist recognizes it means quite a bit more than that, and that it isn't as though everything just has affect. there's more to it. Different cultures matter, different ages and stages matter, and those can be represented in the context. So, a person's valent representation is what Cochrane calls this. In order to integrate affect into a full picture of emotion, is you start with a valent representation of the situation, and you need to consciously understand what it is you're doing. You're appraising the situation. You have a motor plan, and your response towards the object. But then the object is also making either pleasant, maybe an unpleasant affect. The affect is ultimately your attentional priority, and psychiatry will recognize that different people have different levels of affect, and some are more some are more dynamic. That's not the word. I think it's labile is the technical term for like going between aversive and approach. Affect valence is like technical terms, but this person, Lazarus avoids all the formal ideas, and so I think he would go along with this Cochrane thing because it's all about educating. Now, here's a good example of how affect it is highly contingent upon one's. It isn't like you just like something, but it also has to do with your understanding, and that can change. So it's good to evaluate. So this is undeniably, it's a great affect. I don't know, but dude, so you have an affective state, right? And this is awesome. He's the first person to play saxophone in space, Ronald McNair. And it's contingent on the valent representation also, because if you know about the Challenger disaster, you'd say, what a loss. It's S is for sensing. There's a long list of bad things. This is reminding you that therapy is about problems. And this is also a good point to recognize that the form is, and the interview is not only about figuring it out, but what does the patient think is their primary problem? Oftentimes it's psychosomatic, and there's a terrible list here. If you zoom in, S is for sensing, and so where's the validity for this? That's like a part of psychology that's critical. Well, as far back as you can read, those are the five senses. This is the oldest known writings. We'll recognize the five physical senses, and then also the mind which is the charioteer, and then the soul is the one riding the chariot. So you can see that there's also senses are useful during the interview, as are all the different basic id stuff. It's all good during the interview for changing the subject, bringing awareness to the patient and what it is that they want to discuss. Now here is kind of Lazarus. This is his baby here. I is for imagery, and you can see here's this one of his classics. Whenever anybody, this is the mind's eye. whenever anybody came in, he'd say, all right, now I is for imagery. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? And then usually with that object, then he would go on and have, or maybe it was something from one of the other modalities, but then he would have them close their eyes and imagine. And now, originally he was highly cited. This is the early version of Sheldon's history of this techniques. It's called behavior modification, and Lazarus was very cited in here, all about his imagery. The later version, which is called cognitive behavioral therapy, research, practice, and philosophy, it canceled Lazarus, and that's because this imagery thing is actually kind of controversial. He would have them, sometimes he would have them imagining like somebody, and then he would make the situation. Now imagine that they're sinking in quicksand or something. Imagine that, and he would also insert himself sometimes and say, like, you're coming down the stairs, there's your ex-husband, now also I'm there. And so the imagery was actually a very useful tool. And however, it's also a validated form of psychology. It's useful for remembering. Just as the senses were originally developed in order, they were originally expounded upon by the founders of religions in order to help people remember and communicating before the written word. And one of the techniques is to use imagery. So I'm seeing something. He describes the senses, but then in order to remember it better, I'll use my imagination, and it's useful for remembering. This is a fact. C is for cognitive. What's cognitive? Well, that's thoughts. So what are some thoughts that you have? Now, at this point, he's already gone through, or whoever is already gone through, what are your dreams and all that. So what is getting in the way of it? And then really into assertiveness and relaxation training. So at any rate, those are some techniques. You can use any techniques that you want. This is just an approach for assessment. But one of the techniques is a cognitive technique. So you have a thought: I'm last, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve to be first. And then this therapist says, no, say you deserve to be first. And I'm going to refute you and say, no, you're last. You deserve to be last. And we're going to go back and forth like that, all right? And so then you say, it's all about like making a negative condition to help reinforce something new. That's the basis of cognitive ideas, is that there's a really integral part of it is you got to start at the beginning. So cognitive revolution was inspired by Ada Lovelace, Charles Babbage, who was developing an adding machine, and her and him would sit around and imagine. This is the old Jacquard loom. It was very popular. You could import these patterns from the East, and they would weave different flowers and all that. They imagined, what if you could use your adding machine and weave functions together, and we could analyze everything. So this is actually a later version, but around before the cognitive revolution, functions, conditions, this was all very well determined by Pavlov. This is a sad story of brainwashing. So Pavlov never tested on humans. He was very poverty-stricken, devoted to his science until the October Revolution, and a Ukrainian named Mikhail Korstovets was his friend, and he managed to escape, and sometime later visited Pavlov, who at this point had been completely brainwashed by all the fame and all the riches that the Soviets could pour on him, and he had actually started to experiment on people, and today they still do that in communist nations. This is the Uyghurs, so it's validated. Cognitive techniques work. You can change somebody's thoughts, and just by changing the conditions. So that's why the form will actually says this, that the thoughts is probably the most useful part of the whole form. What are some thoughts you always have, and how can we fix it? So this is a different I. I is for interpersonal. Now the form version goes way into history and all these details. I guess that it's really all about like blaming other people. You can usually blame somebody else for your problems, and however, basic ID says that it's only one part of you. Therefore, if you were assertive instead of being the acquiescent woman, so there's all these great qualities: humility, caring about other people, helping others, humility. Did I already say that? And those are good in some contexts, not good in others. So the point being that sometimes you gotta change it up. You gotta change up your interpersonal, and yeah, it's pretty well established that context matters. But D is for drugs and everything biology now. Diet. Did you have 3 meals every single day? This is very whatever. This is an important part, and supposedly the most important part, maybe for insurance purposes. Are you health conscious? Do you not eat junk food? How much do you get to sleep and care about the body? Okay, so that's that, and this is what you end up with. What is this good for? This is what you end up with. Incredible. It's all organized. It's like, this is Alice and her profile. If you just look through it, you see behavior: inappropriate, aggressive response, poor eating habits, history of avoid speaking in public, shy, negative self. So she has this long behavior, and then you go on to affect. She's chronically depressed, anxiety intense, bored, restless, guilt, fears death. Oh my goodness. So you get it. Oh no. What is it really good for? Missing information. That's what it's good for. So the idea is that you end up with BASIC-ID. Now you can do a second order one. Supposedly that's useful. You can even do a third order one, and here I went through, and the fourth one was actually kind of hard to do, because look at, this is what it would be a fourth order. I would need to do 2,400 stars. But this is really what it's good for. Here's the sextant, and I actually had a good quote about the sextant. Maybe I'll. Somebody said that this is. So this is the point: is the interconnections. I guess that's the hard part, but also what you can do with it. I mean, you see how the whole problem is like what. Oh, you're just going to come up with a diagnosis? You're just going to have your primary complaint? No. You can use this for navigating.